love some Chud gameplay, everyone. So, I'm a huge Suikoden fan, right? Which has Suikoden 2, I even got freaking Suikoden 3, but also about Suikoden TACTICS, okay? This is how big of a Suikoden fan I am. Seriously, who has Suikoden TACTICS? Like seriously, they have all the 5 games and the spin-off game, and I think I'm not the only person that ever bought this game. Like seriously. But anyways, I'm very excited, right, for Eiyuden Chronicles, the 100 Heroes. However, it's also a short game apparently, and I think we gotta talk about it. Eiyuden Chronicles is basically the spiritual successor of Suikoden then, and unfortunately the game creator just passed away before it got released. So it's all sad and so on, but here we are with his final game, and unfortunately it is to some extent being ruined by localization. Who could have thought? If you guys please subscribe, press the like button, and check out my video I did last week. That actually covered this topic in great detail, so I have worked with localization for many years myself, right? I'm a game manager, localization manager, blah blah so on, right? And I know this industry quite well, and all of the issues that I basically covered in this video here kind of stems from what I explained last week, right? And also in my No One Wants to Be a Game Writer, because I saw it all coming, you know, years ago, but also last week. I called out exactly the issue. But anyway, let's talk about the issue of Chronicles then. There are many examples of terrible localization in the game industry. Like I said, I covered it in great detail last week, but that was more the backstory. Why is it like that, right? And last year I made a video about Fire Emmlem, which was heavily censored, right? Heavily vocalized, whatever you want to call it, and so on. And that brings me to a topic I think is very important, though, to put out here, okay? Very, very important. Very important here. I don't actually think that primarily the issue of Chronicles session here is woke, speak right. Like a better works, no. Wokeness, no. Woke isn't the issue really here. It honestly really isn't that. This to me is very similar to Unicorn Overload, and I didn't make a video about it, but this game is worse than Overload, right? In the sense that the localizer wants to be an author, right? And I explained this in my previous video last week. They want to be an author. They can't get a job in the industry because they have no actual talent or skills or whatever, right? So instead they get the easy job in the industry, which is game localization, and then they're rewriting the script, right? Because most of the issue in this game is that the sad that it's like, oh, it's like feminism or whatever, woke or black or white. That's maybe, but the real issue mostly is that they rewrite all the characters, right, to kind of fit into, well, if I was the author, I would have done this thing, oh, I would have made this guy more this thing. So it's a lot of that, right? Unicorn Overload, I mentioned, had very much this like Shakespearean thing to it, right? Where the language wasn't really at all like in Japanese, so they're sitting here rewriting it to be much more like, you know, Arctic, ancient language. It's kind of strange, right? So over me here is some lines from Francesca. This I think actually is the best example of this, like, well, it isn't actually like a bit of woke, but rather like I wanna be the author, right? So the issue that happens, right, is that Francesca is quite, how I say, direct, you know, a tomboy, whatever you call her. She's like, F you and F that and so on. She's dropping all these F bombs, right? She's like F, yeah. But in the English translation then, she's saying all these other words instead. Instead she's saying like, oh, this and this, so your pig face and so on. Instead it's like a lot more nuance, right, to her insults. And you might argue that it's better, maybe it's better, but it's not the same character. The character is supposed to be kind of directly F you, right? But here then, the localizers clearly aren't translating it correctly, so they want to add their own input, right? They're obsessed with like adding their own input. If I was the writer, she would be much more nuanced. I would write her much more intelligent, so on. So they're rewriting the character. I think a great example of this thing is actually Yamato in One Piece. If you follow my channel, guys, you know I had a lot of beefs with Arthur, right? With all his fake translations with Yamato, and this is a perfect example of localization gone wrong, right? Combination with Vogt, I suppose. But because, you know, Oda writes her in a very direct, like, typical Japanese tomboy, right? He writes her as, oh, she speaks like a typical tomboy, Yankee, Sukeban. He has a very, very direct, as I said, tomboy language, right? Or rather than tough girl language, right? But the translators, even without necessarily being woke per se, they're like, well, this is kind of like a weird way to speak. She's like, oh, I'm a strong, you know. So they kind of rewrite it to be more nuanced or more intelligent, maybe, whatever you argue, right? And then that makes her seem more like, you know, trans or whatever. But thing is that that's losing out of her character, because in Japanese, she's written as an idiot. Let's be honest, yeah. Yamato is quite, you know, her and Luther kind of the same level of, you know, kind of stupidity, right? It's written as a very, very direct tomboy, very aggressive, quite, you know, one-dimensional, it has quite stupid, right? Let's be honest here. But that is then removed, right? When the English translator are trying to add like nuance to personality. And then people read that and say, well, she's clearly trans then, right? I think, honestly, for me, that is actually the bigger issue with Yamato, that people acting like she's trans or whatever, because it comes probably, again, more so from the fake translation that, for example, that Arthur did, which I called him out many years for Yamato, right? He was fake translating it. He was like, well, this thing could mean this thing in Japanese. So instead of saying like, oh, I'm a strong woman, he was like, well, this could be read as I'm a strong man given this context, blah, blah, blah. But it really wasn't, because he was more like, I'm a strong person or whatever. And he would write like man because, you know, it would fit better for his agenda, right? And then, so of course you kind of, you know, it's like a little hen and the egg, what comes first there. But I do think that is primarily the issue, right? People are changing the language. And then what we see again then, with Chronicle, we have a character like Francesca that again speaks similar to Yamato, where she's just like F you and F that, right? It's much more like much more direct, you know, like aggressive personality, right? An aggressive woman, similar to Tomboy or whatever you call it. But then of course, like I said, right, the author are rewriting it. They're writing the author text, and they're writing it to be more like, you know, nuanced. The insults are more intelligent, but it references these things and so on, right? And that's because they want to have this. They want to write like that, right? This here with Liam is not a great example, I would say, because here in Japanese it's just a laughter. So over here it's like he he he. That is the same, you know, like fu fu fu. It's just a kind of very basic Japanese text, right? You know, someone laughing, right? But then in English, suddenly it's like, well, it's like this whole ladies and gentlemen or gentlemen, but she's much more like, you know, speaking in a grander tone, in a more, you know, correct language, right? And I think that honestly is something I see with a lot of, I think mostly anime, but also gaming, where the localizers will basically like intelligent up the characters, right? You know, like they will have a much more direct, like stupid line in Japanese, like here they're laughing, and then suddenly in English it's like, well, hello everyone. It's like yeah. So, and honestly, right, being fairly good at understanding Japanese, I wouldn't say I'm perfectly fluent in Japanese, but you know I can understand Japanese when they speak and so on, right? I always said that, man, it's so frustrating sometimes playing these games. I haven't played the game enough yet though, but still, I played a few hours, and same thing in Fire Emmlem and so on, Unicorn Overlord, so on. You're playing the games, you like, I'm playing the Japanese, right? And all the time you're like, that's not what it said. You know? Like you hear the Japanese, like, like, fu. The character is laughing, and then the text is like, well, hello everyone, and like, she was just laughing. Like, it's so obvious, right? And I think that still Fire Emmlem is the worst example I've seen on this thing in a few years, where, again, just constantly rewriting of like every character. So, for example, one of my favorite characters, Goldmary in Fire Emmlem Engage, is rewritten so much that she's a completely new character. So basically, Goldmary is a narcissistic douchebag that's very thirsty. She's super thirsty, she wants to get laid all the time, right? And again, she's like a complete douche all the time to both you as a player and your teammates. She's like, you don't need to do something. So, complete, you know, narcissistic character, right? And in Japanese, that's very, very clear. Even in English, they have left some of that, you know, still there, right? But of course, from the Vogue side, they remove most of her thirst, right? Of course, that's hammered down, obviously. But they also kind of removed her general, again, narcissism, her bad percentage, you know, her dark triad, yeah. That's also removed, right? Like, you're playing Fire Emblem, you're like, yeah, I'm listening into in Japanese, English text, and like, basically, all of her insults are like removed in English. You're like, man, she's so much of a more terrible person to ever on her teammates in Japanese. And, you know, it's just like a very different character. That being said, though, I mean, I find her kind of a funny waifu, right? Because she's more like sarcastically, like, well, am I here? You don't need to get all the character out. I can solve this thing. It's more like, you know, she's very, like, you know, again, egoistically, you know, self-love, you know, she loves herself, right, you know? And most of her dialogue with your friends, teammates, is just like, oh, you want to learn cooking? Well, of course, you ask me. I'm the best chef after all. They're all idiots. So it's a lot like that, right? So she mostly is just like, well, I am the best, yeah. She's very, very full of herself all the time, right? And then again, it's completely downplayed in the English, right? Massively so, that it's still there, but it's like there's like 90% left of it, right? Yeah, so it's a very different traits, and her and her best friend are the ones who are most nerfed, right? Because they're the thirsty girls. Of course, you couldn't have a thirsty trans character. Her best friend is trans, and she's super thirsty as well, right? You couldn't have that because that's like, I don't know, stereotypes or something. But this is kind of what I mean, right? You rewrite the characters. Now, I haven't played, honestly, here, because I got this today, right? Eiyuden Chronicle 100, but it's disappointing, right? You know, I'm a huge Suikoden fan, I got all the games in front of me, right? And I'm sitting here being like, here we go again. I'm gonna play the game in Japanese, and I'm gonna hear like all the text being wrong, or I might just play it in Japanese text instead of, because it's just like, it's just frustrating. Honestly, I'm just tired, guys. I'm always not wanna buy the game, you know, when I see this thing. And I don't know. I mean, if I'm like a huge fan of this franchise, right, I probably wouldn't buy the game. And I know people are gonna defend it. People go, oh, but isn't that bad? And I honestly, like I said, I don't find this case super vocal or whatever, right? Like super agenda driven. I think it's more about like really, really terrible game look. I think again, it really proves what I said last week in my "No wants to be a game localizer" video, right? Because it really isn't about, I think, honestly, so much that, oh, I want to make, you know, whatever, push for this agenda or this thing or white men or something. No, I think it's more about that these people are so incredibly incompetent, right? So they can't get a job, they can't get an actual like job they want to have. They can't become a game designer, right? They can't become a game writer or whatever, or write a book or so on. They can't get the actual job they want, right? So they infiltrate this position here, and then they can just, you know, try to change it because, you know, they want it, because this is the only way they can rewrite their own game or something, right? Because no one's ever gonna let them write a game, so they're trying to write a game by like rewriting actual existing game, right? Which is honestly just incredibly terrible, and I can't wait for AI to make them all obsolete, right? But that's the thing, right? As a localizer, your job is to use to, you know, correct translate it, right? Like following the actual author's ID, and then of course you have to change maybe a few things so it makes sense in your language, but you should be as true as possible. These people are doing the opposite, right? They're localizing it purposely wrong, and they know they're doing it wrong. They're doing it purposely wrong because they want to be the game writer. They don't actually want to be that. They can't get a job as a game writer or as a game designer, so they're pretending to be like a game designer by rewriting someone else's script, right? That's kind of what they're doing, and it's truly pathetic. And again, and I'll come back to it, but let's be honest here though. But honestly, of course, it also is somewhat woke, right? We can't ignore that. There is this weird comment like Chud thing. The rewriting of one of the characters be much more mockery and insulting of the main character, so they're being friendly to him, and so on, right? So of course it has a little bit of that left-leaning agenda, and I think that comes from, like I said in my previous videos, and I really recommend it previously, because there we in detail explain that the mentality, right, psychology, and I really go into like, you know, scientific details about it. But basically, short story here then is that these people are usually, you know, woke or left-leaning or whatever you call it, not because they actually believe in it, but because they automatically kind of become that because they haven't succeeded in life, right? Okay, so short basically is that because they have really low salaries, they can't get a good job. They usually lack education, right? They usually lack like a higher education or STEM degree or whatever. And so they actually gives you good money, and they usually don't have rich parents for better either, and so on. And all that combined, right, makes them quite poor, and you know, it's basically like, you know, okay, I want to vote for left-leaning stuff because I want to have, you know, welfare and so on, right? And I mean it seriously, okay? That's not the reason why, right? Because if you have a job, like, so basically again, game localizers are paid so terribly bad, right? So no one wants a job, and for many different reasons. And you're gonna end up with the least talented people that doesn't have any money, and, you know, most of them are just gonna be like automatically left then, because yeah, they are in that category, right, of like, you know, poorer, less educated people and so on, right? And that's just kind of a natural way to become left-leaning, right? Certainly so. And then, like I said, more the video, of course, also is that these people are usually very afraid of getting fired. I mean, yeah, like when I worked in the industry with both testing and localizers, it's that most people, they're the most afraid of getting fired all the time, which is kind of funny because obviously everyone hates them on the internet, but they're really afraid of getting fired inside of the actual, you know, industry, right? Because, I mean, they know that they can't get a real job. They know that no one ever hired them as a game designer or a game coder or whatever. So they're very, very afraid of like standing up for whatever they believe in. And that's what like one activist can really control like a whole studio, because no one dares to say against them, right? And of course those activists then, today them being woke, they will say if you go against them, oh, are you phobe of this thing, whatever, right? So then you can't fire them because they will call you X and Y and Z. So it's like a defense there. And that's also probably a reason why a lot of these game workers becomes fake woke, what you call it, right? Because they're so afraid of getting fired, not because of the actual text, whatever, the lack of talent or the lack of actual skill in the industry. So they get this like, oh, actually, I'm like trans this thing. You can't fire me, then I will call it this thing, right? So I think they use it as a shield, honestly, a lot of them. So I think it's a lot of this, and I kind of feel that it's complete fakeness, you know, to a lot of it. Yeah, they don't even believe what they're saying at all. I think a lot of them get into this like agenda-driven politics because they use it as a shield not to get fired because of their massive lack of, you know, either translation stuff and so on. Think about it. If they just had been a bad translator and done this thing over and over again, which they are doing, right? But they didn't have the shield of like, oh well, I am this thing and that thing, so you can't fire me. Then I will call out on that. Yeah, then they couldn't use it as a shield, right? So it would be harder for them to keep their job doing a bad job. So if that makes any sense. But I think so. I think they have a tendency to like, well, how can I use it as a shield to protect myself, right? And then you get into that positioning of like, well, what if I lie and say I'm this thing? Which, you know, a lot of people do, of course. But at the end of the day, it doesn't like completely ruin the game. I haven't played the game enough, honestly, to feel it's been ruined by it. And I have Japanese sound on it, right? Luckily. But I think it's exactly the thing like Union Overload, where you feel like most cats, like I said, are just like, well, this has not really personality. And honestly, like I said with Yamato, I feel that they have made most characters too intelligent, you know what I mean? And it's like it's a bad way to maybe say it, but yeah, it's kind of like, no, this is what it's supposed to be, kind of direct, aggressive, you know, F-you, F-bomb, like, but now she's just like, well, how can you say that? Yeah, like now they've rewritten her to be more like, you know, thinking and intellectual and so on. That's not her personality, you know what I mean? And of course, usually it's the women that gets intellectually boosted, the man gets dumber, of course, so that's not a topic, I suppose. But I think it is a very clear case there where they're mostly just trying to be the writer or be the designer, right? Because they could never actually get the job. that's the real story. But honestly, though, in my experience, yes, it does hurt the game. It really does. It's very unfortunate, and it's same like the other game I mentioned, where you feel like, well, I guess I have to take every character with a little bit of a. It's like what I'm hearing in Japanese is definitely much more correct, right? And like the textures are kind of there. This is terrible. But anyway, guys, hope you liked the video. I'm gonna play the game still, though. I am. I can't help myself, right? I love this franchise, but I honestly, it's just so bad, right? Because if I didn't love this franchise so much, and if it's one of the many games released this year, right? And I didn't care, then I wouldn't buy it, right? Then I'd be like, ah, whatever. But now it's like Suikoden 2.5. I need to buy, I need to pay it. Yeah, I'm sorry. It feels like I can't avoid not buying it, right? You know what I mean? It's very unfortunate. And also, I need a new Switch game because I just beat Union Overload. I'm gonna try that game now, so. But I guess you guys can have a great day.